Hi, welcome to Studio 708. In this video, we're going to create the stretch top knit foundation. Let's get started. Okay, I'm going to be starting with my L-square ruler here and my marker. I want you guys to be starting with your pencil. I'm using this so that you can see it on film, but we all know that using your pencil would be much more accurate. So we're going to start with our A to C measurement, and we're drafting a size 8 from the book, and the link will be to the book below. So our first measurement is 18 5/8. So I'm going to mark here and draw out. This will be my A to C. My next measurement coming out for this first rectangle will be 8 1/2. So we're going to go ahead and come out here 8 1/2 inches. This will be D. Then I'm going to come out here from the top 8 1/2 inches as well. And then we're going to just connect this outside edge. If you've been really good about squaring up your lines here, this line should be even and you shouldn't have to worry about it. If you want to double check yourself, then go ahead and square up from one of the lines to make sure that it's accurate. Okay, so now we've got our first box, our original draft where we're going to start from here. We're going to go ahead and start making some guidelines in the middle to help us get to the shape of a garment. Next, we're going to label these measurements. So this will actually be our center front, center back. This will be our waistline. And this measurement here is actually the top of the form. So if you're measuring from a body, it won't be exactly the same as what I'm doing here. We'll talk about how to do that in a different video. But from here, go from the top of the form and then think that'll be measuring from where the plate is around a body form until you get to the neckline, which would be about right here. So now that we've got that block set up, let's move on to the next step. We're going to draw a guideline 1 1/4 inch down from the top of the form. So we'll go ahead and talk about this a little bit now. If you don't have a form and you're just measuring something, basically this guideline here that we just drew is what would be the high point shoulder. So from this point on, you can basically think about subtracting that 1 1/4 inch from your measurements to know where you're starting from there. Okay, our next measurement down from that will be just a 1/2 inch. We're doing a guide mark here for our back neckline. So we're going to come out 3/4 inch. So I'm looking through my ruler here. We're going down a 1/2 inch and over 3/4 inch. Okay, then we're going to start up here again and come down 4 1/4. So if you don't have this line, then from this line right here, you're going to come down 3 inches even. So I'm going to go ahead and start up here because we have that measurement. Here we're going to come out 2 3/8. So 1 2 3/8. And then at that location, we're going to go ahead and square back up to our original line up here. Okay, so this will be where it's our high point shoulder, and this will be our front neckline, and this will be our back neckline. I'm pointing right here, be the back neckline. Okay, so this will all be our neck area. Okay, the next thing we need to make is our shoulder line. And that will be 2 inches down from our guideline. So we're going to make a guide mark here. We're not going to make the whole complete line all the way across our pattern, just a mark here. From that location, we're going to go down 6 3/4. And put a mark here, and square out from those locations. Okay, so this will be the underarm area. This will be where our armhole is. We need to find the location of how far in our armhole is going to scoop here. So this measurement is going to be 6 5/16 from here. So think you're measuring from the center of your body out. The 16ths are the tiny little marks on the side of your ruler. So it's going to be one of the little marks past the quarter. Okay. So now we're set up to start drawing our shapes. So next thing we're going to work on will be our shoulder line, and then we'll fill in our armhole and find our waistline down here. Shoulder length is 5 1/16. So we're going to start at this point right here. This one's going to be a little tricky because it's not something you can just measure and know exactly where it is. We're going to have to use our guide mark here. So you want to make sure on your ruler you're finding that 5 1/16 mark, putting 0 exactly on your point here, and then tilt your ruler until that 5 1/16 touches this guideline. That's going to be where your shoulder is. So once you get that, go ahead and mark it. We'll know this will be our high point shoulder and this will be our shoulder tip. Okay, next we're going to draw our armhole. And usually I can fit this in pretty good. Sometimes you may not be able to. You may need to draw from here to here with one pass and then from here to here with another pass. But this one fits pretty good for me, so I'm going to draw it all at one time. And this will be our armhole. Okay, that looks pretty nice. So the things that we need to check here are that we have a squared out line here. And we're pretty good. So we want to make sure that when our armhole comes together, it doesn't create a point, that when it comes together, it creates a smooth line. So you can check this by making sure you're squared out about 1/4 of an inch either way, and then you should be good. Okay, with this one here, once we draw our hip line, we'll check this one to make sure it does the same thing. Our hip line, excuse me, our waistline. Okay, next we're going to draw our bust line. So we need to know where our bust level is in comparison to our armhole. So we're going to measure once again from the top of the form to the bust line. Our measurement for this will be 11 5/16. So we're going to start at A and measure down 11 5/16. And then we're just going to mark that. It's an inch, basically an inch and 1/16 lower than our underarm line. So we're just going to draw that line here. Now we need to mark where our apex is on this line. So that's basically where your nipple is. It's the fullest, should be the fullest part of your bust. So we're going to come across here 3 9/16. So 1/2 inch is 8/16. So we're one little mark past 1/2 inch. So this will be our bust apex. At that point, you might use it to make princess seam lines. If you wanted a dart for some reason, most of the time knits don't need a dart, but if you wanted a dart, you could use it for that. Let's say maybe you wanted to make an empire line, and so we would cut here because we'd know that was below our bust point, and then we could spread this part. So it's always good to know where your apex is on your pattern. Okay, for our waist measurement, we are going to come over 6 3/8. This was the same thing we did on our hip foundation. So if you've been following along and made our hip foundation first, this should be the same measurement. So we're going to come 6 3/8 and make a mark. And then we're going to drop down 3/8 of an inch. Okay, so you should be able to connect those. If you have your original pattern from your hip foundation, you can use that curve so that you know that we're basically having the same curve going on there. Tracing was a little rough. Or you can use your French curve or your hip curve to curve that out as well. I'm going to clean that up a little bit. But it's better if you can trace your hip foundation, that way you know those lines match exactly. Okay, once we have that, then we can draw our side seam, and you're going to draw it all the way down to this point. Okay, And then we talked about making sure this was square right here, and we are, so we're okay. So we're lining up from our side seam and making sure that it's squared out here for that 1/4 inch. Same thing needs to happen down here, where we're going out a 1/4 inch right there, making sure that we're squared there. That way we know when we sew the back to it that it's going to line up and it's going to look okay. Okay, so next thing we need to work on is our neckline. Okay, some things that I see here that a lot of people do that I don't want you to make this mistake is turn the curve too much where you're actually coming back up from that point or dipping down past that line or coming too far over here. Think again that if this is coming here and you dip past that, it's going to make that point in the center front of your garment, and we don't want that right at our neckline. So we'll make sure that we're basing off the squared line here and we're coming to this point right here. So easiest part to do is put your finger. Easiest thing to do would be to put your finger here so that you don't have to keep looking there, and then just put it where your ruler matches right there. So I'm going to really start drawing about a 1/2 inch away up to that point. And do you see now how I've got a little bit of a squared part right there, so that when I cut this on the fold I know that I've got a nice smooth neckline. Okay. Our back neckline. Now we're going to work on the back part, and our back neckline comes to this line. So I'm going to flip this over, actually. So this is the straighter part of my neckline, and this would be the more curved part. So I'm going to go from where my line is, right here, and not come back up and make that point. Start right here and draw to that point right there. Once again, I have a nice smooth neckline curve there. Okay, the next thing we need to work with is our armhole. So if you think about how the human body's made, we don't have the same armholes in the front and the back. Our armhole in the front here is going to be smaller than it is where it comes to right here in our back line. So we need to move this line out a little bit for our back armhole. We are going to move this out 1/4 inch, and then we'll redraw that armhole. So I'm just going to give myself a mark here so that I know what I'm aiming for. Then I'll use my French curve ruler again. And blend that in here. And I'm having to turn this a little bit to get it to fit right, but blend that in here. Okay, so we should know that should still match right here, and it should still match right here because we kept those lines. So this is your front, this is your back armhole. So you need to make sure that when you're doing that, you're cutting those separately, and we'll need to cut really 2 separate patterns, but we draft them at the same time because everything else except for our neckline and our armholes are the same. That is your stretch foundation top. We'll get busy in the next videos making our stretch ratio patterns. See you next time.